It's going to be coming up on June 22nd. We'll be very shortly sending out the invites to those, and you can always sign up on our website at elkproducts.com.
In here, and we're just going to go ahead and dive right in. Where I'd like to start is with some database organization, organizing accounts and that sort of thing. So I've got ElkRP here open. This is ElkRP2, and you'll notice that I have some account folders. I've got business accounts, defaults, residential accounts, and I even have like a restaurants account drilled down into the business account. So I'm going to show you how to make those folders and how to apply accounts to them. So I'm going to start out with this business center here. I'm going to open that account. And I would just like to place that in my business accounts folder. So I can click browse here, and you'll see I have the different folders that I have available, and I can click select there and then save that. And when I go back to my accounts list, now it is under business accounts. I've got two different residential accounts here that are on the same street. They're in the same development. I would like to put those in a folder. I have maybe a lot of accounts in that particular development, so I'd like to organize it that way. And you can organize your accounts however you would like to, but this is just to give you some ideas. So I'm going to open the Miller family account here, and I want to create a folder under my residential accounts. I already have this folder created, but I'd like to drill down into another folder. So to make a subfolder, all you have to do is put a period in between your primary folder, and then I can just name this, maybe the development is Cherry Grove, and then click Save there. And again, when I go back to my accounts now under my residential, I'm going to have a Cherry Grove folder. So now I can go back to the Clarks here and put them in that same folder. And once the folder has been created, then you can actually just select it there. So this gives you some ways to organize some accounts. Another thing that I want to do here, I've got, there's the Wise family, and then they have other accounts with me for their businesses, a convenience store and a sporting goods store. Now I could put those in the different residential or business accounts, but I'd like to just, because I have so many accounts with this particular customer, I want to make them a special folder. So I'm just going to start by going into this particular account. And to make a new folder, one that you don't already have at all, you just go in here and type whatever you want to call it. So I'm going to call this Wise Accounts. And that's all you really have to do. Now it'll come up and say it doesn't exist yet. Do you want to create it? You just say yes to that, and then again save the account. And now I have a Wise Accounts folder, and I can easily open these other accounts up and just stick them into that folder. So that gives you an idea of how you can organize your accounts using the folders. The next thing I would like to talk about is synchronizing databases. ElkRP has a neat little feature that allows you to synchronize databases. So I'll browse here to the database that I'm working with, and I've named that something different from the default, but you could just select the default database there. And then that would be the master database, and then the remote database. In this case, I have that database on a USB thumb drive. So I'm just browsing on my computer here to the thumb drive, and there's the account I want to synchronize. Pick your two databases, click Analyze, and what it does for you here is show you, okay, all of these accounts exist in the master database but not the remote one. So then I could choose any one of these, or I could choose to copy them all, and that's going to put those new accounts into this remote database. Now this bottom section shows you accounts that exist in each one but have differences. And so maybe the technician that's using this remote database has made a change to the fun daycare account, and we want to copy that over to the master database. So you can select those and move them, and you can see you can do that in either direction. It also will allow you, if you want to select one, and you can view the accounts and try to determine the differences, which one was connected to last, that sort of thing. So that just gives you a way to synchronize databases, which can be very helpful if you're running RP on two different computers. Maybe you have one computer in the office and your technician has a laptop. This is an easy way for you to keep those synchronized. Another thing that you will want to do, this is a very good idea, to back up your accounts database frequently, so that if you were to have some kind of problem, maybe your hard drive on your computer crashes, that sort of thing, you have some kind of backup of that. So I'm going to show you where to find the accounts database so that you can make a copy of that. Maybe you burn it to disk, put it on a remote drive of some kind. Maybe you have a backup drive that you use, so that sort of thing. So where it is going to vary depending on your operating system. And so I've given you the path here on the screen. If you're running Windows XP, it's going to be in your Documents and Settings, All Users Application Data, and there's an RP folder in there. Or if you're running Windows 7 or Vista, it's in Program Data and then the RP folder. I happen to be running Windows XP, so I've just basically went into my computer, went to my local disk C, drilled down into all these folders, and here's the ElkRP folder. So you'll notice there's a number of different databases in the ElkRP folder. Let's get that where we can actually see all the names. There we go. So you've got this _DB, mdb.back, and you've got your ElkAccounts2.mdb. This ElkAccounts2 is the one that you'll want to back up. That has all of your accounts in it. Now you'll notice I also have an ElkAccounts.mdb. This is for the older version of ElkRP, the 1.6.26. If you happen to still be using that, or if you, like me, you still have both versions on your computer, but this is the one that we're using in the current software. So then you can, of course, just copy that, save it somewhere else, again, burn it to disk, whatever you need to do to back that up. Now there's another database here that you may want to back up. That's your operators database, and that's going to be this ops2.mdb, and that's if you're using the operators feature of the system that allows you to have different levels of access. When you launch ElkRP, you have to log into it. So let me just now show you how you set that up. If you go into the Setup menu, you can select Operators, and you'll see that in my account here, in my ElkRP, I don't have that enabled at this particular time. But if you wanted to enable that, you just click Enable Multi-Operator Access. There's going to be these 4 default users, and this is guidelines of suggestions and different things that you might have, different levels. Apprentice and installer, supervisor, of course, would have everything. So let's just take a look at one of these. We'll take a look at the supervisor one. If you wanted to add another user, you just click Add here. If you want to change one that's existing, you've got your Remove if you want to get rid of one. But let's just change this one here. We'll take a look at it. So you've got a place here for your name. That's like the username, and then a password. So those fields, you would enter the information there that you want that particular user to have. And then you've got all these checkbox options that determine what that user can do. Of course, you've got your administrator can change the setup information. That's something you wouldn't want everyone to have. The primary user would want that, but then you're not going to want, maybe all of the technicians to have the ability to change this information. You can also choose whether or not they can change passwords. This is a primary function that most of your users will need to have, the ability to edit and save changes to accounts. But you may have some users that you don't want to be able to delete any accounts, so you can customize it that way. Printing information, importing and exporting information. Again, maybe a newer employee, you might not want to be able to import and export accounts, or you've got your user codes here, your communicator set up, so you can see the different categories of things that you can hide or choose to let someone see. You've got your different connection methods and then what they can do while they're connected. So, this one is one that you may not want everybody to have, remotely arm and disarm from ElkRP. You want them to connect, make programming changes, but you don't really want them to be able to turn the system on and off. So that just gives you an idea of what you can do with operators. And I would tell you to use some caution with this. If you enable it, be sure that you have documented your usernames and passwords, because once this is enabled, when you start ElkRP, it's going to ask you for a username and password, and if you don't have one, you're not going to be able to use the software. So just be cautious when enabling this feature. And once you've made some changes, you can click Save and Exit. I want mine to remain not using operators, so I'm going to exit without saving. So now I'm going to go ahead and open an account here. open the Clark's account, and again, this is just stuff I've made up, but want to talk about connection methods. Now, there are 3 different ways that you can connect with ElkRP, and we're going to give you an overview of all of those. The first method is a direct connection. Now, the M1 Gold has a serial port on board, and the M1 EZ8 has a module where you can get your main serial port added to the system, and you can have either a direct with a straight-through serial cable, or using a serial to USB converter like the ElkRP2 you can connect your computer directly to the control. When you do that, you either have the serial port on your computer or you're using that USB device, you need to know what COM port to set up. So when you go into the setup menu here and choose communications, it asks you for a serial port to use for direct connections. And you can see here I have COM9 selected. So where did I come up with that? I'm going to go into the device manager, and I like to just go to my computer and right click and go to properties. You can also get to the device manager by going to the control panel and clicking the system icon. Then I want to go to the hardware tab and open up my device manager on my computer. Now here under ports, you see I have listed a USB serial port, and it's COM9, so that's where I come up with that number. And I'm going to double click on that and bring up its properties. Now what I'm interested in here is the port settings, and the main thing is this bits per second, the baud rate. That needs to be set to 115/200. I've noticed with a lot of these USB to serial cables it wants to default to 9600, so it's always a good idea to come and check this and make sure it's set up correctly. These other settings should be correct by default: data bits 8, parity 9, stop bits 1, and flow control none. So you just want to double check that, and again that's where I've got my COM9. And I'm going to just close that, and so I'll select COM9 here. You may find that you have more than one COM port here. You just want to be sure that you select the correct one. Then it's just a matter of going to connection and selecting direct using COM9. Now if you go to your connection menu and it just says direct using here, that would mean that you haven't selected a COM port, and it's not going to work until you do. The other connection method is using a modem. And again, I'm going to go back to Setup and Communications, and here's where you can select your modem. So you just want to select the modem that's installed on your computer. You have a Configure button here. You really shouldn't need to go in here and do anything, but if you do find that it doesn't connect with your modem, you're going to want to click that Configure button and make sure that your port speed's set to 2400 here. But generally, the default settings will work just fine. Once you have selected your modem, again you'll see dial using, and you'll see your modem name there. And then you'll notice you've got a number of different options. Fully automatic means it's just going to dial. The panel has to be programmed to pick up at a certain number of rings, and when the panel answers, RP will negotiate a connection with it and connect with the control. Prompt when panel answers allows you to have a bit more control over when RP starts negotiating that connection. You need to be able to hear your modem dialing and hear the communication back and forth to get this, because when the panel answers it makes 3 beeps, and that's what you're listening for, and you would get a button on your screen to click OK when you hear that. So if your modem is one that you can't happen to not be able to hear, you're not going to be able to use that particular method, because it does require you to hear what's going on. You've got the dial, hang up, dial again, and this is another very popular option. If you have voicemail, or maybe there's an answering machine or a fax machine, something that you need to try to get around that's connected to the same phone line, you can enable this feature in globals, and I'll show you that here in just a minute. And that allows you to dial into the panel, let it ring once or twice, hang up, wait a few seconds, and dial again. Now you've got a hands-free method here that just takes care of all of that for you. Or you can use the prompted method, and there again you need to be able to hear your modem, because you need to be able to hear it ring so that you can tell it to hang up on the first call. Then there's a timer that you tell it when to make the second call, and it does give you a little countdown on the screen, and then it's establishing a connection that way. So again, to use this prompted method, you do need to be able to hear. These next 2 require that someone be on site. There's a menu in the keypad. It's in your menu 8, which is your system settings. Option 5 is your download control option. So you would need to instruct the user to navigate to that place on the keypad, and then you can either using the customer resource panel to answer, you'll click that, and when they hear the phone ring, then they have to press the button on the keypad. Or if you happen to already be talking to the customer on the phone line that's connected to the panel and you're on the phone line that's connected to the modem, then you can use the telephone connection already established. And when you're doing that, the timing is very key because they need to press the button on the keypad at about the same time that you're pressing this option in the software. So that can be a little bit tricky. If it doesn't work the first time, just try it again. The timing is crucial on that one. Local connection via house phone, that's if you happen to be on site, you can plug your modem into a phone line that's on site and connect locally that way. And the third and final connection that we're going to go over here is the network connection. So when you're connecting to the panel for the first time, you need to go here to the M1XCP setup and click the Find button. That's going to go out over the network and look for your M1XCP. In your case, you'll only see one. I happen to be here in the building where we have several running, so I'm going to select my XCP here and click Use Selected. And then close this, and you'll notice that transferred my IP address and port number right here. So then I can go to Connection and choose Network, and it will actually connect over the M1XCP. So I'm going to go ahead and let that connection occur here. And you'll see it says it's checking for conflicts. This software will compare what you have in the control to what it sees here in the software and tell you if there's anything that's different. And so you can see here my rules and texts are different. So I'm going to select those items, and if you've changed it in the software and haven't sent it to the control yet, then you want to send. If you changed it in the control and haven't changed it in the software, then you want to receive. In this case, rules and text can only be changed in the software, so I'm going to go ahead and send those items. And once you've resolved your conflicts, yellow window goes away. So the next thing that I would like to talk about, I do want to go over very briefly here one thing, and I'm not going to spend a great deal of time on this because we do have other resources and I want to get to as much material in ElkRP as we can, but I am going to briefly go over this email tab with you in the M1XCP setup. If you want to have the M1XCP send emails, you have to give it a mail server to send the mails through. That's what we're asking for here. This is the address of the SMTP mail server that you want to send the mail through. That will generally be the address of the mail server address of your ISP, your service provider. So you want to check for that, and they'll give you the port number. They generally have that documented on their website. You have to put in a from address. That's a valid address that's set up with that mail server. That's your email account there. That has to be there or it won't work. If you have to log into the mail server, you've got a place to put in a username and password here. And then you have 16 blocks here where you can put in an address and the message that you want sent to that address. So you have to fill in all of that information and send that to the control for this to work. Now, I'm going to hop over here for just a second, and you'll see on this one, I actually have a problem here. I will never be able to send any emails because I don't have any DNS server information. So if you've selected to have a static IP address on your system and your DNS servers look like this and your email's not working, that's why you need to put in primary and secondary DNS servers. So I just wanted to briefly go over that. That's the biggest gotcha on the email. Now there are other resources, and when we send the follow-up, we'll send you some links to some other resources if you're having problems with your email setup or just need some guidance there. We'll definitely get that to you. But just wanted to briefly cover that. The next thing I would like to talk about is the event log. ElkRP has the capability of pulling the event log from the panel. It holds 512 entries, and you can pull that event log. And again, I click the log button here in the toolbar. That brings up this account log screen. You'll see there's nothing in it. I either have to tell it I want to receive the newest 20 events, which if you're just looking for something recent will help you to not have as much data to go through, or you may want to receive the entire log. I'm going to go ahead and receive the entire log here. And you'll see I've connected to the panel a number of times. There's been some arming, disarming, various different things that you'll see here in your log. And from here you can choose to save this to file, and you can save it as a text file or a CSV file, which will open in Excel. and then you can choose where you want to save that and what you want to call it, and that will give you a file that has all this log information in it. Or you can choose to print it. Now if you choose to print it, you want to go into the Setup Print first and make sure that the proper printer has been selected and everything, and then when you click print, it will just go directly to that printer. You can also clear the log from here by clicking that button. You've also got a status screen that's accessible from your toolbar that is broken up into areas, and it will show you if the system's ready or not ready, give you zone status information. You can see you get voltage readings on these zones, so this can be very helpful when you're working with your zones or maybe doing some troubleshooting. If something doesn't seem to be working the way that it should, you can use this information to help you find out what's going on. You can also arm and disarm the system using these buttons, and if there's any troubles, they'll be shown here. So this is good information for you, just to make sure that everything's working right or to help you if you're having a problem. Okay, we went over a lot of these first items in the basic training, so I'm going to skip over them for now. Under the assumption that you have that information under control. If you have any questions about that, just let us know. So I want to jump right into cutoff timers. What cutoff timers do is determine how long the siren goes off for a particular alarm category. So you can see here all of mine are set to 600 seconds. I would probably want my fire to be higher than that. So that would be practically, it is actually, that particular number is infinity on the M1 system. So I want my fire to, I don't want it to go off, but my Berg is going to go off after 10 minutes. The siren's just going to cut off. This is kind of a peacekeeper, you know, and a lot of different communities have ordinances as to how long a siren can go off in an alarm condition. There are some cases where, like maybe with a water alarm, you don't want the siren to go off. So you're going to want to set that to 1 second. Don't set it to 0 because that will make things not work correctly. If you have rules written, they won't fire, you know, they just give you problems. If you set it to 1 second, you will never hear the siren, and that will still allow the system to function correctly. So say, for instance, on water, you're going to be making phone calls, you know, sending emails, turning the water off, that sort of thing, but you really don't want the siren blaring. You can just set that down to 1 second, and the siren will not go off. I want to take a look at globals next. And the first one, we went over this one in the basic training. Again, if you have any questions about any of the things on the miscellaneous screen, let me know, but I'm just going to skip over it because we have gone over that in basics. So I want to look at the zones tab here, and I want to point out the fast loop response time and the slow loop response time. Most zones are going to go by this slow loop response time, which is, you know, 400 milliseconds. That's still pretty fast. But if you have certain sensors that you need to have a faster response from, you can select fast loop response on your zones page, and it's going to go by this faster time of 40 milliseconds. Now you can change these times as needed. These are the default settings, and this generally works for just about anything you're going to run into, but if you do happen to need to change them, you can do that here. You've also got some options here for cross-zoning. You've got the cross-zone verify time. If you have 2 or more zones that are in the cross-zone pool, and again, that's an attribute option on the zones page, this determines how long you have between trips when it will actually create an alarm. So you would have to trip one zone and then the other within 30 seconds for an alarm to occur with this setting. So you can adjust that. You've also got the cross-zone self-verify. That means if you have this box checked, that means that a single zone receiving 2 trips within this period of time would create an alarm. The other option here is Audible system troubles, and this is one I get some phone calls about. You know, the keypad's beeping in the middle of the night because the phone service went out, or there's been an AC failure. My customers told me they don't want to hear that. So you can uncheck this box, and your keypads won't beep in those conditions. Now that doesn't mean that the events are going to be ignored. They're still going to be logged and therefore can be reported. There's still going to be a display on the keypad showing that there's, you know, a phone trouble or AC failure, that sort of thing. You're just not going to get the beeps. I'm going to explain what common area is, and that's G13 here, this tab. If you have this is more of a commercial application. If you have, say, a office building and there's a common lobby or vestibule type area for two different offices, you might have one office business as area 2, the other as area 3, and then area 1 would be the lobby that's common to them. So you could come here and select area 2 and area 3, and what that means is when anyone disarms area 2, it's automatically going to disarm area 1. So that keeps area 1 from creating an alarm when someone comes into area 2 and disarms the system. Now there is no implied arming here. It's not going to automatically arm area 1 when all the common areas are armed, but it is possible to do that in rules if you want to, and I'll show you an example of that here in just a bit. The next tab that I want to look at is Output 1. And the main thing here is the volume control. You do have this option here to change the yelp to a buzzer. Again, that would be, if you're in a commercial setting and the buzzer is the desired sound, you can change that. But the main thing we're wanting to look at here is these different volume controls. And so you see all of mine are set to 1 right now, and that's because my M1 system is here beside of me and I don't want it to be very loud, but you would most likely want your maximum alarm volume at the highest level. Now if you have the initial set to a different level than the maximum, that's going to gradually increase the volume over a 90-second period. So it'll start out very low and gradually get louder and louder and then be at full volume at 90 seconds. And again, you might want your alarm voice volume, maybe you want that at maximum volume, but your non-alarm voice you don't want quite as loud. So you have some options here to control the volume for different things so that it's not, blaring loud when it's telling you your system's armed or the front door's open, but it's definitely going to get your attention if there's an alarm. The next tab is Voice, and what this does is just allow you to disable certain parts of the voice or disable the voice altogether if you wanted to do that. So you can click here and that's going to disable all of the voice, or say you want some of the voice messages but you really don't want chime messages, or you really don't want trouble messages. You can customize which parts of the voice you hear on this screen. On the Output 2 tab, from the factory, Output 2 comes set up to use the onboard siren driver, and you would want to have a speaker connected to that. But in some cases it may be desirable to have a self-contained siren connected to Output 2, and Output 2 is generally used for the outdoor siren. So if you are going to have a self-contained siren connected, you would need to make a change here to voltage out so that Output 2 is outputting 12 volts. For you, and that is currently limited to 1 amp. So again, the default setting is to use a speaker, but you can come in here and change it if you want to use a self-contained siren or a siren driver. Maybe you want to get some different sounds out of it than the system provides. That's when you would want to make this change. You can have Output 2 delay before coming on. Again, Output 2 is generally the outside siren, so maybe you want to give 60 seconds for the customer to get to the keypad and turn the alarm off if they've had a false alarm condition before it starts blaring outside and alerting the whole neighborhood that there's been an alarm. You can have a delay on that. By default, that's turned off. You can also have a single alarm lockout, which means that Output 2 would go off the first time there was an alarm, but if within the same arm cycle there's another alarm, it won't go off again. And again, that's kind of a peacekeeper, keep your neighbors happy, or to follow certain community ordinances. The next tab we're going to talk about is the Special tab, and there's a lot going on here. I just want to point out very quickly, we kind of cover this in basics, but I'll just point it out again. Your rings until auto answer and your ring hang up answer that we were talking about when we were discussing modems, you set those two right here. So you'd want to have this set to higher than your answer machine and then turn that on if you have that case. You cannot have just this ring hang up answer checked. If that's the only way you're ever going to connect to the panel, you still have to have some value other than 0 here. If you have 0 here, even with this checked, it will not work. So just be aware of that. There are two different settings here that I want to talk about that are a bit confusing. If you have two-way listening enabled, you've got your two-way callback time in seconds, and that determines how much time the central station has to initiate a two-way listening session when there's an alarm and listening is enabled on that zone. So you would want to coordinate with your central station and set that to the value that they generally use. They should be able to give you some guidance there. You don't want to set it too long because additional alarms are held during that period. The other option you see here is CS verify call time in seconds. Now it may seem that these are the same thing, but they're not. If you're using two-way listening, you'll want to set the two-way callback time. If you are not using two-way listening and your central station wants to be able to call the location and verify the alarm via a phone call, that's what this CS verify call time is for. So again, it holds additional alarms so that the phone line's available so that they can make that phone call. But you would not have both of these set at the same time. You're either using two-way and you set this one, or you're not and you set this one. And again, coordinate with your central station to see if that's something that they want you to enable in the system, and don't set them for any longer than is absolutely necessary, because it does hold the phone line open and doesn't send in additional alarms that will be possibly occurring during this period of time that you set here. There is an option here that's been recently added, and you do need to have some newer firmware. All the panels that are shipping from Elk now have the newer firmware in them. This goes back maybe a year or so. It's been in here. It's something a lot of people ask for. Say telephone line fault timer. Now previously, when the phone went out, the panel knew it right away and would create a fault condition. That's cause the keypad to beep if that feature is enabled, that sort of thing. And you couldn't really set what time it went off of there, but now you can. If you maybe have an area where the phone service, maybe it goes out for just a few seconds at a time here and there, you don't want to be alerted of that or have that logged or cause the keypad to beep and annoy your customer, that sort of thing. You can set this in, and it's set in minutes as to how many minutes the phone line has to be down before the panel will do anything about it. So that's something we had a lot of requests for, and we managed to add that into the software here and into the firmware of the control. If you're using an Ethernet interface on your main serial port, or maybe you're doing a direct integration with a third party, Crestron, AMX, Control 4, those kinds of things, right here is where you set the baud rate. Generally the default setting of 115/200 will be fine, but if you need to change it, here's where that's done. And it's also very important, this section with all these check boxes, these 6 check boxes determine what data comes out of the serial port. So when you're doing that third-party integration or using the XCP and maybe our RMS software, those sort of things need that data that's coming out of the serial port so that they can keep the screens updated in real time. So you do need to make sure that you have all these options checked in those cases. Now, a third-party integrator may say, okay, we don't want event log data. You can then turn that off, but in most cases you want it all. And the other thing I will point out here is the keypad programming lockout. If you want to limit what can be done in programming changes at the keypad, you can come in here and make changes there. So you see your options are, you can change telephone options and view everything. So that would mean you cannot change telephone options. So you can view everything, you can change everything but the telephone options, and that kind of locks in your reporting so that that doesn't accidentally, your central station number get changed. So that's the purpose there. The other is you can view everything but you can't change anything, and then finally you cannot change or view any options, and this only relates to the keypad programming. All right, now I would like to dive into the automation portion of the programming, and we're going to go over some of this stuff very quickly. Tasks, all you're really doing here is giving the task a name, choosing whether or not it's shown, and giving it a voice description if you want to do that. So there's not a lot going on this screen. It's basically just names and whether or not you want to see that on a user interface. On the lighting screen, this is where you would program your lighting. Now, a nice feature, a lot of the different lighting partners that we work with, several of them anyway, will allow you to import lighting data. So you can, from their software that you're setting up, whether that be the ISY or UPB or Lutron Radio Raw, whichever the case may be, you can, from their software, create a file that we can then import. So you would just, again, how I got to this was right-click on lighting, go to import lighting data, then you're selecting the file format that you're using. You can browse to where that file is stored on your computer and then choose some basic options. Do you want to leave existing names or clear them out? Do you want to set the option flag? That would generally just be for the universal devices. The other ones don't really use that. Whether or not the show flag is enabled or left as is, and whether or not voice descriptions are cleared out or left as is. So you make those selections and click import and you're done, and it imports all the software information from the software that you set up, and that way you don't have to retype all the names and everything. Very nice feature for you there. On outputs, again, it's basically just giving the outputs a name, choosing whether or not they're shown, and giving them a voice description if you want to. And the M1 system has outputs 1 through 208. 205 of those are possibly usable outputs if you have expanders on the system. But you can only name up to output 64. So just keep that in mind when you are wanting to use outputs for things that you want to have your user interface control directly. You want to keep those in the first 64 outputs so that you can give them a name and they'll show up on your user interface like the ElkRMS software. We touch on this in the basic training. I'm just going to quickly go over this screen. You can put in, this is sunrise and sunset, and this is how the system knows whether or not it's light or dark outside or when sunset or sunrise occurs. This is based on latitude and longitude settings. We have an option here where you can select the closest city, like Hickory's the closest thing to us here, or you can, from your GPS or from Google Maps or whatever method you want to use of getting that information, you can go ahead and put that in. Once you have selected a city or put in your latitude and longitude, you need to click the calculate button, and that will change the settings in the table here. So if you want to use sunrise, sunset, is light or dark, those sorts of things in your rules, you got to set this stuff up. The voice section here, that allows you to customize the voice so that the different things the system automatically says. If you want to change the way it says something, you can do that. If you want to blank out a message, like a good example, I was on a tech support call, and when the chime was turned off, they didn't want to hear chime is off. They didn't want to hear anything when they turned the chime off. So you can come in here and just blank out this message. I'm just selecting blank for each one, and that way it won't actually say that. Or if you wanted it to say something different, then you just pick different words from the vocabulary. So that allows you to do some voice customization. Custom settings. And this is a very useful feature in the software. This allows you to give your users some flexibility to change their programming later. That can be a number, a timer, or a time of day. So you can see I have a couple set up here, and I'm going to go into those when we get into the rules section. So here you give them a name, select the type, and give the initial value, and then the customer will be able to go into their user interface, their keypad, that sort of thing, and change that if they wanted to change the value there, which is a very helpful option. You have 32 counters on the system. Counters get set and added to and subtracted from using rules, so here all you're doing is giving them a name. Also on the thermostat screen, all you're doing is giving them a name here. The controls are actually done in rules. So in the text section, this is where you can put in special ASCII strings that you want to send or act on when they're received into the system, or you can just put in simple text like you see here. I have a water filter replacement reminder here that I will send to the keypad on a certain day of the month. So I'll show you that here in just a second. But to make a new one, you just click new here, and you can just begin typing. Like maybe you want to say happy birthday, you just type that in. Or if you're putting in special strings, you would just type in the string here, and then you also have some special characters that you can insert here, like a carriage return or a carriage return on line feed. You can also insert things like maybe you want to say outside temp, and then you want to insert the value of a temperature sensor. So then I can select, my outside temperature sensor here, and that's going to insert that value for me. Alright, now I'd like to get into rules, and I'm going to go over several examples. I want to start out with, we were talking about common area, and I want to show you how you could have the system arm Area 1 when Area 2 and Area 3 are armed. So I'm going to start out with whenever, and I'm going to go under Security Alarms and say is armed to away mode. Now I want to select Area 2. Then I'm going to go to and say when Security Alarms is armed away. I'm going to say Area 3. So whenever Area 2 is armed away and Area 3 is armed away, then I would like to automatically arm Area 1 to away. So I've built that rule. Now that one will only work when Area 3 is armed first and then Area 2 is armed. So I have to account for the other possibility of Area 2 being armed first, then Area 3. So what I'm going to do here is just right-click on this rule and choose to copy it. And then I'm going to insert that, and so now I've basically duplicated that rule, and that's going to allow me to double click on it here to edit it, and I can go in here and just pick the other area. Instead of having to basically rewrite this rule, I'm just going to be able to change a few things about it. So now I have Area 3 as the whenever and Area 2 as the and statement. And so that accounts for the two different possibilities that Area 2 and 3 could be armed in. And that'll automatically arm Area 1 when those two areas are armed. The next example I'd like to show you is controlling the voice on the system based on a time of day and also using an F key. So the first one I'm going to go on is the time of day. So if I go to whenever and time occurrence, I can select time of day equals. Now I could just put in a time here. If you've talked with the customer and they're like, I want the voice to be turned off at this certain time, you could put that in here. But what I'd like to do is go ahead and use a custom setting. I set up a custom setting for the voice off time. That's the time that the customer told me they wanted the voice off, but they may want to change it later, and this will allow them to do that. So whenever the time is my voice off custom setting, I'm going to go to then, and I have enable disable voice. And so I'm going to choose to disable the voice at the voice off time, and then click done. Now again, I'm just going to right click and copy this rule and then insert, go to paste and insert before selection. And now I can just again edit and change this to my voice on time and change this to enable. And that just to me seems quicker than going back through and making all those selections again. So now I have one rule that says when the time is my voice off time, which is custom 7, then it's going to disable the voice, and when the time is my voice on time, then it's going to enable the voice. So say the customer said they wanted it off at 8:30 p.m. and back on at 6 a.m. I would set those as the initial times for those custom settings, but change their mind later, they can change it themselves, and I don't have to go back and make a programming change. Plus it's just more convenient for them. They don't have to make a phone call to have this simple thing changed. Now I'd also like to be able to, on the fly, turn that on and off with an F key. So I'm going to show you how to use what I'm going to refer to as a phantom or an unused output to provide that as a toggle function from a single F key. So I'm going to go to whenever and say when the keypad F key press, and I'm going to choose my F4 key on any keypad is activated. So then I'm going to turn an output on. Now I have selected just output 100. It's an output that doesn't physically exist. I'm just going to actually toggle it, so that means each time the button's pressed it's going to change state, and the system keeps up with that state of that output even though it's not physically there. So when my F4 key is pressed, I'm going to toggle output 1, and that's going to be the end of my first rule in this set. Then I'm going to write a rule to say whenever output 100 is turned on, then I want to disable the voice. And again, I'm just going to use my right-click copy and paste so that I can go in here and edit and say when the same output is off, then I want to enable the voice. So you can see how once you get accustomed to the software, there's little shortcuts that you can take to make things go a little quicker for you. So now I can control the voice either by this custom setting time or using my F4 key. The next example I'm going to show you is how to define a task. So when we go to Whenever and we go to Automation Tasks, I've already named my tasks on the task screen. So I've got a thermostat economy task here. I want to define that. So whenever that task is activated, I'm going to go to Then and Thermostat, and I want to set the cooling desired temperature. Now again, I could set that to a fixed value, but I'd like to build in some variables for the customer so that they can make changes to this later on if they want to. So I've set up a custom setting, which is a number type of custom setting for the economy cool set point. I'm going to pick Then again and go back to Thermostat and also set the heat set point. And again, I've created a custom setting for economy heat. So I've got this task that's defined now. When it's activated, it's going to set the cooling set point to my custom setting for cool and the heat set point to my custom setting for heat. And you could similarly define a task for comfort that does this, the same things using the custom settings that I've set for comfort. And that would look very similar, so I'm not going to go through that particular example because it's basically the same thing I just showed you. Alright, the next thing that I would like to do is control a light based on a door opening. And the classic example here is the closet door. You turn on the closet light, you dig through the closet, and the closet light gets left on forever. So you could have either based on a contact on the door or even a motion detector, however you'd like to do it. In this case, I'm showing a door. Have that light just be timed. So I'm going to go to Whenever and Zone Input Change. And you can see here my first zone happens to be the master closet door. So when it becomes not secure, then I would like to control lighting, individual, and again my closet light's the first one here, and I want to turn that on for a duration of time. I could select that I wanted it on for 5 minutes here, however long I want, but again I'm building in some variables for the customer. We've set it initially to 5 minutes, but maybe they'd like that to be more or less time later, so I've set up a custom setting time for the closet, and that would be a timer example for custom settings. So again, you've got numbers, which you can use for thermostats is a good example, timers for something like this, or time of day for the example with the enabling and disabling the voice. So you can see how understanding what those custom settings are and how they work can really allow you to build in some flexibility for your customer, and just makes it easier for you because you don't have to be bothered with making simple changes like that. You can build that in for them and they can make those changes themselves. They're going to think you're just fabulous for being able to do that for them, and it's going to save you a lot of trouble. Now, the next example I'd like to go over is making an announcement when a door gets propped open. This is more, maybe for a commercial type installation. There's a back door or rear door in the warehouse, and it tends to get propped open, and you want to make sure that everybody's aware of that so that the door doesn't get left open and someone can go close it. So I'm going to show you how you can do that, and again I'm going to use a phantom output, but in this case instead of using it as a toggle function I'm going to use it as a timer. So I'm going to go to Whenever and I'm going to say Whenever Zone Input Changes, and I'm going to select my rear door, which is zone 65. When it becomes not secure, then I want to turn on a phantom output, and in this case I've selected output 65 just because it's easy for me to remember that's associated with zone 65. I'm turning that on for a period of time, and in this case I want that to be 5 minutes. So I'm using this output as a timer. This output's not actually physically controlling anything, I'm just using it as a timer. So when that door comes open, that output's going to turn on for 5 minutes. So then I want to trigger on that output turning off, which is going to happen 5 minutes later. So I go to Whenever and Output Change. I'm going to go find my output 65. And I want to say when it's turned off, which again would happen 5 minutes after the door was opened. And then I'm going to, in an AND statement, check to see if that door is still open. So I'm going to go to the input zone is. scroll down and find my zone 65, which is my rear door, and if it's still not secure, then I want to make an announcement. And so I'm going to go to Speak, and in the voice section under System Miscellaneous, there are 10 miscellaneous messages that are just, there's nothing in them by default, so you can put whatever you want in here. So I went into Miscellaneous 1 and put in a message that says, you know, rear door open, please close that door, something along those lines. So I want it to say that. But I'd also like for it to repeat that message until someone goes and closes that door. So what I'm going to do is go back to then and turn this output 65 on again. Now again, I'm using it as a timer. This time I'm going to set it to 30 seconds. So I'm going to turn it on for 30 seconds. So what this does is allow this rule to basically loop. It's triggering when this output turns off, checking the door, and if the door is still open, it's making the announcement and then turning the output back on again for 30 seconds. So 30 seconds later, this rule is going to be evaluated again. If that door's still open, it's going to make the announcement again. And it's going to continue to repeat that announcement every 30 seconds until someone closes that door. And so just using this output, again, that doesn't physically exist. It's not controlling anything. It's not a physical output. But we're using it as a timer here to allow us to decide, okay, initially we want to give them 5 minutes to hold the door open. People are bringing things in, that sort of thing. But if they leave it open more than 5 minutes, then every 30 seconds we're going to get an announcement saying, close that door. All right, I want to show you an example now, and I realize I'm running out of time. I got just a couple of more examples here to show you. So the next one I want to show you has to do with using a counter, and I want to use a counter to turn on an attic fan if it is 15 degrees hotter outside than or in the attic than it is outside. So if the attic is 15 degrees hotter than the outside temperature, I want to turn on the attic fan. So what I'm going to start out with here is whenever, and then say every 5 minutes, I want to set a counter. So I go to then and I go to set change counter, and I want to set that counter to the value of my outside temperature sensor. So I've named the counter here outside plus 15. I'm setting it to the value of the outside temperature, and then I'm going to turn on another phantom output, and I'm turning that on for, I'm going to turn on output 150, and I'm going to turn that on for just 2 seconds. And the reason that I'm doing that is to give myself a buffer between this rule and the next one so that I make sure things happen in the order that I want them to. So setting the counter to the value of the outside temperature, turning that output on for 2 seconds. Then I'm going to go to whenever and say whenever that output 150 is turned off, which is going to happen 2 seconds later, then I want to add to that counter. So I'm going to go back to set change counter, and I want to add a value of 15. And that's how I'm getting my 15 degrees hotter than it is outside. I've set it to the outside temperature first, and now I'm adding 15 to that. I'm going to click done. And now the rule that's actually going to control the attic fan. So I'm going to go to whenever and time occurrence and say every 20 minutes. And I'm going to go to temperature. And I'm going to say the temperature in the attic is greater than or the value of this counter, which is the outside temperature plus 15. Then I would like to turn on an output, and so I have output 7 here controlling my attic fan. So that's a way that you can do some temperature comparisons and that sort of thing. And again, I realize we're running out of time, so I'd like to go ahead and open us up to some questions. Beth?
Okay, Amy, we're ready to start taking some questions. We've got some already that have been sent, but we would like for everyone, if you've got questions now, to please go ahead and start sending those in. I'm just going to start with a few that we have, Amy.
Okay.
The first couple kind of go back to email. It said the first one says, I've heard somewhere that when email is not functioning, you can enter the IP address instead of a URL in email settings, and that will solve the problem. Is that true?
That would only be true if your problem was that you didn't have your DNS entered. If you didn't have a primary and secondary DNS server, then it can't resolve the mail server URL. So if you had the IP address put in, it doesn't have to do that, and that would make it work. But again, that just kind of goes right back to the thing I was saying about the DNS servers. So if that works for someone, that means that you don't have the right DNS servers entered on the TCP IP settings tab, and that could prevent other features in the M1XCP that you're trying to use, like maybe the time server, from working as well. So you really need to address that DNS issue.
Okay, can the SMTP address be entered as a URL instead of an IP address for email sending?
Yes. And that's generally what you would do. You would have like smtp.myisp.com or something like that. Whatever their mail server address is, it's generally going to be a URL.
Okay. How many temperature sensors can you have? For example, outside temperature for an attic fan, crawl space temperature for a crawl space heater.
The system supports up to 16 temperature sensors. And the reason that there's a limit on that is because the zone temperature sensors, the M1ZTS and the M1ZTSR, those can only be connected to the main board. So in M1 Gold, you have 16 zones on board, so you could have 16 of those temperature sensors. If it's an Easy 8, obviously that's going to be 8 since it doesn't have as many zones on board. It only has 8 on board, but the Gold would support 16.
Okay, the next question. When we have more than one door that is open and the siren is set to sound, then when you close one door, the siren stops. How do you deal with that? Let me read it again.
Yeah, so I'm assuming these are Berg zones. So the siren, when one of those zones opens, if the system's armed or if it happens to be a 24-hour zone, if you open a door and that sets off the alarm, then the siren's going to go off for either based on the cutoff timer or until someone disarms the alarm. So if another door opens, that's going to be logged and could be reported as another alarm. The siren's already going off. Closing either one of those doors would not turn the siren off. You have to put in a code, or the time on the cutoff timers would have to expire before the siren's going to stop sounding. So maybe we misunderstand the issue there, and that might be a good one to contact tech support on if that didn't answer your question.
Okay, the next one is, can I add users on the keypad?
Yes, you can. In the programming menu, Menu 9, submenu 02 is your user authorizations menu, and that would allow you to go into any of the possible 199 users and set what that user can do. Then once you've done that, you can go into Keypad menu 6, which is your change user codes menu, and put in the numeric code that you want that user to have. So you can completely manage users from the keypad if you choose to do that.
Okay, the next question is, are the voltage readings in real time or a snapshot?
No, they're in real time. So if you have that status screen pulled up and you make a change on a zone, let me see if I can get that to come up here. So if you have this pulled up and you make a change on a zone, then you're going to see that happen automatically. And let me see if I can just trip one for you here on my system. So you see my zone 2 is showing open at 13.7 volts. And so now you should see I have shorted that zone, and now I'm seeing 0 volts, and that's based on my having actually shorted the zone on the panel here in my office.
Okay, the next one is, everything in the house is controlled by Crestron with their touch screens. Can the M1 be controlled through the RS-232 port from the Crestron?
Yes, it can definitely be controlled that way, and that's something that should be available. Crestron developed a driver or a plug-in, however they label that, I'm not sure, but they developed something using our RS-232 protocol to allow the M1 to be part of that Crestron system. So it's definitely able to control it, as far as arming and disarming and that sort of thing. You may want to, if there's a Crestron integrator that you're working with, you may want to talk with them about that, or if you're doing the Crestron yourself and you're not clear on how that works, just go ahead and give tech support a call or send them an email. And we can help try to get that working for you. There's really not a lot of setup. There's really no more than what I showed you in the globals with the baud rate and those check boxes that has to be done on the M1 end. But if you're just not clear on what needs to be done there, how it works, just let us know. But it's definitely possible to control it from the Crestron.
Does the M1 have a GSM communication option?
We do have some options available there. Currently, we're working with the Uplink 2500 or the AES IntelliNet. Those are integrated through the M1 XSP, which is a serial expander, and that allows you to do full reporting. So you get full reporting through those. Alternately, there are some other devices that do like a dial capture that basically connect to where a phone line would connect on the panel. They make the panel think there's a phone line there and just capture the data coming out of the dialer. Tailguard is one that has that. There are others, so you can use something like that as well. So those are the primary options you would have, either through the serial expander with Uplink or AES, and then the other option would be a dial capture device like the Tailguard.
How do you connect the M1 Gold to ISY for Insteon integration?
That is done through the M1 XEP. So when you have the M1 XEP set up, you're giving it an IP address, that sort of thing. You'll find in your ISY software there's a place for you to put in that information, and that allows the ISY to talk to the M1 and the M1 to talk to the ISY for the lighting control. So you would put in that information in your ISY software, and then you also have an option in your ISY software to create a file that we can then import into our lighting screen.
Does HomeLogic have the ability to control M1 Gold?
HomeLogic is one of the partner manufacturers listed on our website, so they have done something with the RS-232 protocol and interfacing with the M1. I could not tell you, exactly how much of that has been implemented or how much it does, but you will find if you go to elkproducts.com, under the M1 section there's a partner manufacturers link, and you'll find a link to HomeLogic there, so that you should be able to get some more information on exactly what that does. But they are one of the partners we have listed.
Okay, Amy, for Keypad assigned shortcuts, like the one you set up for temperature changes, can you limit the users that have the access to control those by requiring a user code?
Yes, it is possible to have a key require a code. If you go into the keypad screen here, under your F keys, you have this requires code checkbox, so that you could have a key password protected or code protected. The thing there is, if that person has a valid user code in the system and it's assigned to the same area that the keypad's assigned to, then that's going to satisfy the requirements of that option. So I don't know if that fully answers the question. You can definitely have a key require a code, but as far as saying, okay, only this user can use it, that's all going to be based on which areas they're assigned to. So if they have area assignment at the same area that the keypad's assigned to, their code's going to work.
Amy, can you also set user code specific function commands, like have F4 for different functions for different users or at different keypads?
You can have it different at different keypads. You can't really have it different for different users. Well, let me just think about that. Would that be possible? That's something I would really have to set up. I've never tried that. Technically, I could see how the rule could be written. You could have a rule that says whenever the F key's pressed and last user was, if you're requiring a code on that. But I would really need to test that and see if it actually works that way, because I haven't tested that before. Now, alternately, if you wanted to have, you know, a code do something like that, you could have, you know, the code set up as an access code, and then you could write a rule to say whenever access on a particular keypad and last user was, then do this. And that way, they're not really pressing an F key, but just putting in their code at that keypad. But you would, you know, want to decide based on the application whether or not that would be a viable option. If they're going to be using the code for other things, is that going to cause confusion, or, you know, that sort of thing. But there's different things that you can do there. But as far as the F key thing, I'll follow up with the person that asked that, because I want to test that before I say, yeah, it'll work, because I can see how it could work, but I don't know that for sure.
Okay, and this is going to be the last question we're going to have time to cover today. And the question is there a way to tie into a millivolt type signal that is typical of a building management system on furnaces and boilers?
So if I understand the question, it's a variable voltage device, but we're talking about millivolts here, like very small amounts of voltage. I don't think so. I mean, the M1 system supports analog zones, and so you can have a zone set up to trigger on different voltage readings, which is generally going to be on a variable resistance device that is altering the voltage reading on the zone based on changes in resistance. You can write rules. You can set up an analog zone. That's one of the zone definitions. And then you can write a rule to trigger on different voltage readings on that zone. But it's, you know, it's like 7.2 volts. It doesn't really drill down into, you know, small amounts of voltage. So the millivolt part of that is where I'm thinking no. But the system does support analog zones that can be triggered off of different voltage levels, between like 0 and 13.8 volts.
Okay, thanks, Amy. We actually did get to a lot of the questions. There were a few that we weren't able to, and we will try to respond back to you. It could be in the follow-up email that you'll get next week, and if not, you know, always feel free to contact our tech support department. The email address is on your screen as well as the phone number, and we'll be glad to help you in any way we can. We thank Amy for helping us out today. You did a great job, Amy.
Thank you.
I just want to hope that everyone has a wonderful weekend. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.